The rust-colored dust of Tartarus VII never settled. It was a world of perpetual wind and perpetual endings, a fitting graveyard for a man who had already been buried once by the government he'd served. Kalen Vance sat on the corroded landing pad of his one-man outpost, the grit coating his tongue and the back of his throat. He watched the twin suns bleed into the horizon, a daily ritual that reminded him of the blast glare of a ship's reactor going critical. He'd seen enough of those to last a lifetime. His hands, calloused and scarred, rested on the stock of a worn kinetic rifle, a relic, a child's toy compared to the weapons he'd once wielded. He was a ghost. A bad memory the Terran Concord had tried to erase after the disaster at Cygnus X-1. They'd called it the Reaper Incident, a sterile, bureaucratic name for the day his entire unit was sacrificed to cover up a truth the galaxy wasn't ready to face. The official report cited insubordination, use of unsanctioned biowarfare, and catastrophic collateral damage. They didn't mention that the Reapers were the only thing standing between humanity and the Vex. They didn't mention that the Vex didn't just kill you. They remade you. Inside his cramped HAB unit, a comms console that hadn't received an official transmission in a decade suddenly chirped to life. It was a low-priority, wideband signal, the kind of deep space spam that usually advertised black market cybernetics or off-world pleasure colonies. Kalen ignored it, but it didn't stop. The chirp became a stutter, a frantic, desperate pulse that clawed at the edge of the system's silence. He sighed, the dust grinding between his teeth, and walked inside. The screen flickered, displaying not an advertisement, but a fragmented data burst originating from the uncharted Oort cloud on the fringe of known space. The vessel ID was Civilian the Stargazer, a deep space research ship. Then the images started to load, corrupted and flickering. They were raw, unfiltered security feeds from inside the ship. He saw a science lab, pristine and white, now smeared with something dark and organic. He saw a human colonist, a woman, strapped to a medical table, her body convulsing. Her skin seemed to melt and reshape itself, bones elongating, twisting into impossible, non-Euclidean angles. Her scream was silent, but her eyes, wide with a terror beyond pain, were a vortex of agony. The feed cut to another clip, a man in a lab coat being dragged away by something that was once human, but now moved with the fluid grace of a predator, its limbs too long, its face a smooth, featureless mask of pale flesh. A final audio file played, the voice hoarse, broken by static and something wet, like blood pooling in the speaker's throat. This is Dr. Eris Thorne of the Stargazer. We found it, a Genesis forge. They're not conquering us. They're rewriting us. The seed is planted. It's already inside. The transmission ended with a sound that would haunt Kalen for the rest of his days, a soft, wet pop, followed by the sickening crunch of bone reforming. The screen went dead, leaving only a single, heavily encrypted data packet behind. Kalen stood frozen, the old cold dread coiling in his stomach. The Reapers had a name for it, the Bloom. It was the Vex's true weapon, not their particle lances or their obsidian warships that slid through the void like sharks. Their weapon was life itself, twisted and perverted. They were cosmic sculptors, and flesh was their clay. They didn't commit genocide, they committed conversion, absorbing a species' genetic code and erasing it from existence, replacing it with a new, horrifying form of life that served the Vex's inscrutable purpose. The Concord's official stance was that the Vex were a myth, a scare tactic used by Outer Rim separatists. The Reaper incident had been the cost of maintaining that lie. Kalen knew what would happen next. The Concorde would receive this transmission, classify it, bury it, and send a sanitized patrol ship to the Stargazer's last known coordinates, where they would find nothing but a field of debris and officially declare the ship lost to a micrometeoroid shower. No panic, no broken treaties, no admission that humanity was facing an extinction event that couldn't be fought with fleets or diplomacy. It could only be fought with monsters. And Kalen was the last of his kind. He ignored the encrypted data packet for a moment and walked to a locked panel at the back of the hab. His palm print, scarred and faded, made the lock hiss open. Inside lay the tools of his old trade, his Reaper kit, a suit of sleek, black armor made from a memory polymer that could shift its density, allowing him to phase through solid matter for brief, agonizing seconds. A neural-linked pulse rifle, the Wraith, which fired bolts of dark energy that didn't just burn a target but unraveled its molecular structure. And at the bottom, a small, silver datachron containing the Ghost Network, the encrypted, off-grid comms channel that connected the handful of Reapers who had survived the Purge. Most were dead. A few were in black site prisons. But he knew at least 3 were out there, scattered across the galaxy like him, living under new names, buried in new lives. He returned to the console, his movements now precise, filled with a purpose he hadn't felt in 10 years. He plugged the datachron in, its archaic interface lighting up the screen with a single, stark symbol, a skull intertwined with a reaping scythe. He bypassed the Concorde's network, routing his signal through a series of dead satellites and defunct colonial relays, a digital ghost haunting the system's back alleys. He composed a message, not of words, but of data. It was a fragment of Vex genetic code he'd stored from Cygnus X1, a sequence so virulent it acted as a digital scream to anyone who had seen the bloom up close. It was a call to arms that only the damned would understand. Beneath it, he added a single set of coordinates, Tartarus 7. Then he sent it. He sent it to Anya Banshee Petrova, the unit's master infiltrator and assassin, last seen operating as a high-end bodyguard in the neon-drenched metropolis of Neo-Kyoto. He sent it to Jax, the team's heavy weapons specialist and breacher, a mountain of a man who'd reportedly become a bare-knuckle fighter in the lawless asteroid pits of the Hades Belt. And he sent it to Elias Thorne, the unit's tech priest and hacker, Eris Thorne's estranged brother, a man who had gone deeper underground than any of them, rumored to have fused his consciousness with the data streams of the Galactic Darknet. As the message wormed its way through the void, Kalen finally opened the data packet from the Stargazer. It wasn't schematics or tactical data. It was a single, horrifying file, a complete genomic map of the seed. It was a retrovirus, airborne and dormant, engineered to rewrite human DNA on a planetary scale. It didn't kill, it waited. It waited for a trigger signal from a Genesis forge, and then it would activate, turning every man, woman, and child into a chrysalis for a new Vex brood. Eris Thorne's final words echoed in his mind. The seed is planted. He wasn't talking about the forge. He was talking about them. All of them. Kalen looked at his own hand, at the veins beneath the skin, and for the first time in a decade, he felt true, undiluted fear. This wasn't a mission to save a lost ship. This was a mission to save humanity from itself. He suited up, the black armor sealed around him with a familiar, suffocating embrace. the neural link syncing with his mind, flooding his senses with tactical overlays and threat assessments. He picked up the Wraith, its cold weight a grim comfort in his hands. He was no longer Kalen Vance, the exile. He was Reaper One, the ghost who walks. He strode out of the hab and into the relentless wind. The twin suns now just a memory on the horizon. His ship, a small, heavily modified Razor-class courier named the Karen, sat waiting. It was old, ugly, and stripped of anything that could identify it. A perfect vessel for a dead man. Halfway across the galaxy, in a rain-slicked alley in Neo-Kyoto, a woman with silver hair and cybernetic eyes that saw in 3 spectrums simultaneously dispatched 2 would-be assassins with a pair of vibroblades. As they crumpled to the ground, a hidden receiver implanted behind her ear chimed with the signal she hadn't heard in 10 years. The Vex code screamed through her neural interface, a jolt of pure ice and terror. Her client, a wealthy corporate magnate, was already forgotten. Anya Petrova dropped her blades, which retracted silently into her forearms and melted into the shadows. In the roaring chaos of an asteroid-fighting pit, a hulking man named Jax ignored the blood pouring from a gash on his brow. His opponent, a 4-armed alien bristling with muscle, charged him. Jax didn't even brace for impact. His wrist mounted calm, welded into his flesh, vibrated with an ancient, familiar terror. He caught the alien's charge, lifted all 600 pounds of it off the ground, and broke its back over his knee. He tossed the body aside, collected his winnings, and walked out of the arena without a backward glance. And in the silent, digital ocean of the darknet, a disembodied consciousness known only as Echo felt the message. It was a ripple of pure horror in a sea of data. Elias Thorne, what was left of him, pulled his awareness back from a dozen different systems, disentangling himself from corporate mainframes and military firewalls. For the first time in a decade, he focused his entire being on a single point in the physical world. A dormant service android in a forgotten cargo bay on a remote space station whirred to life, its optic sensors glowing with a sudden, cold intelligence. The Reapers were answering the call. The harvest had begun, and the only ones coming to stop it were the ghosts humanity had tried so desperately to forget. The first to arrive was Anya. Her ship, a needle-thin vessel designed for stealth and speed, landed without a whisper, its black hull absorbing the dying light of the twin suns. She emerged from the ramp like a wraith, clad in form-fitting sin leather, her silver hair a stark slash against the ochre gloom. Her cybernetic eyes, cold and analytical, swept the horizon before settling on Kalen. 10 years. Kyle, she said, her voice low, melodic purr that held no warmth. I was starting to think you'd finally found a hole deep enough to die in. Kalen didn't smile. I was, he replied, his own voice a gravelly rasp. Then the universe decided to dig me up. She walked past him towards the Karen, her movements fluid and utterly silent. She didn't need to ask what was happening. The Vex code he'd sent was a psychic scar they all shared. It was a summons that bypassed reason and went straight to the primal terror they had buried at Cygnus X1. There was no refusing it. Jax arrived an hour later, and his entrance was the opposite of Anya's. His ship, a heavily armored, brutally functional bulk freighter that looked like it had been used to ram planets, slammed down onto the landing pad with a shriek of tortured metal, kicking up a tidal wave of dust. The man himself was just as subtle, He stomped down the ramp, a 250-pound wall of muscle and scar tissue, a heavy pulse cannon slung over his shoulder as if it were a duffel bag. He looked at Kalen, then at Anya, and grunted. This better be the end of the world. Anya leaned against the Karen's hull, cleaning a non-existent speck of dust from her vibro blade. It always is with him, she quipped. Jax ignored her, his gaze fixed on Kalen. I was retired. Kalen met his stare. So was I. So were we all. A heavy silence fell between them, thick with the ghosts of their slaughtered unit, with the decade of exile and bitterness. They weren't friends. They were survivors, bound not by affection, but by a shared damnation. Their reunion was cut short as the interior lights of the Haran flickered and died, plunging them into the dim twilight of Tartarus VII. The ship's systems rebooted with a low groan, and a voice, synthesized and layered with the static of 1,000 different data streams, filled the comms. System integrity compromised. Rerouting core processes. Welcome back. Reaper 1. Kalen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Elias. On the main view screen inside the cockpit, a face began to form from a swirling vortex of light and code. It was a ghost image, a digital echo of the man they once knew, his features constantly shifting, dissolving, and reforming. This was what was left of Elias Thorne. The preferred designation is Echo, the synthesized voice stated, devoid of inflection. My brother is dead. Jax grunted again, a sound of grim acceptance. Anya's expression remained unreadable, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her blade. We saw the transmission. Elias. Kalen said softly, I'm sorry. The holographic face flickered. Regret is an inefficient emotional response. Eris did not transmit a eulogy. He transmitted a warning. I have completed the decryption of his final data packet. The four of them gathered in the cramped briefing room of the Charon, a space that smelled of ozone and recycled air. The holographic image of Echo shimmered in the center of the table, his presence more unnerving than any physical form could have been. The Genesis Forge is not a weapon in the conventional sense, Echo began, his voice a cascade of information. It is a resonant biofrequency amplifier. The Vex retrovirus, the seed, is dormant in 98.7% of the human genome across all colonized systems. It lies sleeping in our DNA, passed down, inherited, spread. It is waiting for a specific signal, a harmonic key that will initiate the bloom. He paused, and a star map materialized in the air. The Forge will broadcast that key. It won't be a wave of death, but a symphony of change. Every human being in range will become a Vex. Instantly, Jax slammed a massive fist on the table. So we find this music box and we smash it. Where is it? Echo's hologram shifted, zooming in on a dark, swirling nebula at the edge of the galaxy. Eris embedded its location within the viral code itself, a repeating energy signature, masked as junk data. The Vex hide their secrets in plain sight. They call this region the Serpent's Maw. No charted warp lanes, unstable gravitational tides. It is where the Concorde sends its dead ships to die. Anya spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the technical jargon. The Concorde, they'll know. That transmission from the Stargazer wasn't sent on a closed channel. Their deep space arrays would have caught the fragments. They know someone is stirring the ashes of Cygnus X1, Kalen nodded grimly. They'll send someone to clean it up, to make sure the Vex stay a myth. His words were prophetic. In the sterile, zero-gravity command center of the Concord's Intelligence Directorate, orbiting high above Earth, Admiral Valerius watched the fragmented Stargazer report for the 10th time. He was a man carved from ice, his face a mask of cold pragmatism, his uniform crisp and immaculate. He had been a junior officer during the Cygnus X-1 incident, one of the architects of the cover-up. He had personally signed the order that classified Kalen Vance and his unit as traitors and war criminals. He recognized the Vex biosignatures in the report instantly. It was the same nightmare he had spent a decade burying. His ghost is walking. Valerius murmured to himself. He brought up a file, one buried so deep in the archives it was flagged with a dozen kill switches. The Reaper program. He saw Kalen's face, younger, fiercer, but with the same haunted eyes. He's going to try and be a hero, Valerius said to the empty room, and heroes get people killed. He opened a secure channel. Activate Protocol Chimera. I want the Purifiers mobilized. Their target is a rogue Reaper cell led by Kalen Vance. They are considered armed, extremely dangerous, and a threat to interstellar security. An aide's voice, hesitant, came back. Sir, the Purifiers. Their engagement protocols are terminal. Valerius's gaze never left Kalen's file. This is not an arrest, Commander. This is an erasure. The Vex do not exist. The Reaper program does not exist. Kalen Vance died at Cygnus X-1. Ensure that it remains true. Find his ship. Scour it from the galaxy. No witnesses. No survivors. No signal. Back on the Karen. The mood was grim. They had their target, but they were a crew of 4 broken soldiers in a rust bucket courier, flying towards a galactic graveyard to fight a war for a species that would see them as monsters, while being hunted by the very government they once swore to protect. It was a suicide mission. It had always been a suicide mission. We'll need gear, Jax rumbled, checking the ammo count on his cannon. Better than this. We'll need intelligence, Anya added, her eyes already scanning stellar charts. Safe havens, black market contacts. We can't use public relays. Echo's voice was flat. I can provide the latter. The darknet is my home. I will shield our passage. But the hardware, that requires a more direct approach. Kalen looked at the faces of his team, one cynical and sharp, one brutally stoic, one a phantom of light and data. They were all that was left. I know a place, he said, keying in a new set of coordinates. An old armory, forgotten after the Outer Rim secession. It's run by a man who owes me his life. He pushed the throttle forward, and the Karen's engines roared, lifting them from the dusty plains of Tartarus 7th. The ship shuddered as it broke atmosphere, a wounded animal climbing back into the void. Below them, the planet was a dying ember. Ahead of them lay the Serpent's Maw and the cold, silent dark. One last harvest, Kalen whispered to himself, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. They were reapers, and their work was not yet done. The hunt was on, but the galaxy was mistaken about who was the predator and who was the prey. The armory was located on Xylos, a moon orbiting a gas giant in a system that had been officially declared uninhabitable due to extreme radiation. It was a lie, of course. One of many the Concord used to keep prying eyes away from its less savory assets. The moon was a jagged piece of rock and ice, its surface scarred by asteroid impacts, but beneath the crust, a network of tunnels and hangars had been carved out, shielded from the radiation by 10 kilometers of solid granite. It was a ghost facility, a place where weapons were developed that broke every interstellar treaty in existence. Its warden was a man named Silas, a former Reaper quartermaster who had been left for dead during the Cygnus X-1 purge. Kalen had dragged him through 3 clicks of burning shipwreckage and gotten him to an escape pod. Silas owed him a debt of blood. As the Quran descended through Xylos's thin and toxic atmosphere, Silas's voice crackled over the comm, laced with the gravelly distortion of a cheap voice modulator. "You've got balls of solid durasteel coming here. Kyle, this rock is still a Concord black site, even if it's not on the maps." Kalen guided the ship into a chasm that opened like a wound in the moon's surface, leading to a hidden hangar bay. "I need supplies. Silas. The kind you can't buy." The hangar doors sealed behind them, and the cavernous space was flooded with harsh, white light. Silas was waiting for them, a gaunt figure in a patched-up enviro suit, his face a web of burn scars. He looked at the 3 figures disembarking from the Heron and let out a low whistle. The whole damn gang, a ghost, a killer, and a walking tank. "I'd say it's good to see you, but that would be a lie. Seeing you means the galaxy's on fire again." Silas led them through corridors, humming with the low thrum of a fusion generator running on fumes. This place was a museum of forbidden warfare. Cages holding dormant xenomorphic bioweapons lined one wall. Racks of gravity distortion grenades and chronomines gathered dust in another. This was the Concord's ad. The dark and violent heart it pretended it didn't have. "Heard you were dead," Silas said, his eyes on Jax. Jax shrugged his massive shoulders. "Heard the same about you." In the main armory, Silas gestured to the rows of weapon lockers. "Take what you need. My debt is paid. Then get the hell off my rock. Valerius is hunting you." Kalen paused. "Valerius, he's still climbing the ladder." Silas laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Climbing, he's at the top. Director of Intelligence. He's the one who gave the order at Cygnus. He buried us. Kyle. And he's got a new set of shovels." He pointed to a data screen. "Protocol Chimera. He's reactivated the purifiers." Anya's cybernetic eyes narrowed. "Purifiers, I thought they were a myth. A bogeyman they used to scare rookies." Silas shook his head. "They're real. An anti-Reaper unit. Psychologically conditioned. Neurally dampened. Fanatically loyal. They don't feel pain, fear, or remorse. They're designed for one purpose: to hunt and kill us. They'll be equipped with Reaper tech, reverse-engineered from our dead." He looked Kalen in the eye. "They're not soldiers, Kale. They're scalpels. And Valerius is the surgeon. He's not trying to stop you. He's trying to dissect you, to erase any proof you ever existed." As Jax and Anya began to gear up, loading their new armor with enough firepower to level a small city. Echo's holographic form materialized beside a dusty server bank. "Silas, your network is archaic, but it has a back door into the Concord's military comms chatter. I require access." Silas grunted. "Knock yourself out. Sparky. Just don't trip any alarms." While the others prepared for the coming storm, Kalen followed Silas to a small, cluttered workshop. On a workbench lay the broken pieces of a Reaper neural interface, the kind that had been implanted in all of them. "Can you still fix these?" Kalen asked. Silas picked up a micro-welder. "The hardware, yes. The wetware, the part that links to your soul, that's beyond me." He looked at Kalen's scarred temple. "Valerius will be tracking your neural signature. Every time you use your phasing ability, every time you fire the Wraith, you're lighting a flare in the dark. It's how he'll find you." Kalen's jaw tightened. "Can you mask it?" Silas shook his head again. "Mask it, no. But I might be able to turn it into a weapon." He held up a small, crystalline shard. "This is a feedback scrambler. The next time you activate your neural link, it'll send a psychotronic pulse back down the tracking signal. It won't kill anyone, but it'll give whoever's on the other end a front row seat to every nightmare you've ever had. It might buy you a few seconds." Kalen took the shard. "Seconds are all we ever have." Their outfitting was interrupted by a blaring alarm. Echo's voice echoed through the armory, calm and chillingly precise. "Conquered Purifier vessel, the Styx, has just dropped out of warp at the edge of the system. They have bypassed local sensors. They are running cold. Estimated time to arrival, 12 minutes. Silas swore, hitting a button that began sealing the blast doors. "They found me. They found us." Jax hefted a new rotary plasma cannon, a grin spreading across his face for the first time. "Let him come." "No," Kalen commanded, his voice sharp as broken glass. "We don't fight them here. This is a tomb. We run." They sprinted back to the Charon, the Klaxons wailing a death knell behind them. As the ship's ramp was sealing, Silas threw a data chip to Kalen. "A parting gift, full Concord fleet deployments, courtesy of your pet ghost. It's real time. Now get out of here." The Charon blasted out of the hangar, the force of its engines cracking the ancient rock. As they ascended, Kalen saw the Styx on the view screen. It was a matte black ship, an angular predator designed for one-purpose murder. It didn't hail them. It simply opened fire. A volley of particle beams slicing through the void where they had been moments before. Kalen pushed the engines to their breaking point, the old ship groaning in protest as they dodged and weaved through the asteroid field surrounding Xylos. The Styx was faster, more maneuverable, and its weapons were leagues ahead of theirs. "They're locking on," Anya shouted from the co-pilot seat. "Evasive maneuvers aren't working." "Echo," Kalen barked. "Get me a solution." Echo's hologram shimmered. "The gas giant. Its magnetic field is unstable. If we can enter the upper atmosphere, it may disrupt their targeting sensors." It was a desperate gamble. The gravitational shear and atmospheric pressure could tear the Charon apart. But it was their only chance. Kalen dove the ship towards the swirling, chaotic clouds of the gas giant. The Styx followed relentlessly, firing precise, surgical shots that peeled away sections of the Charon's hull. Alarms screamed through the cockpit. The ship shuddered violently as it hit the upper atmosphere, the view screen turning into a maelstrom of red and orange gas. "Hull integrity at 40%, Jax yelled from the engineering bay. "She's not gonna hold," just as the Styx lined up for a killing blow. Kalen saw his opportunity. A massive, planet-sized lightning storm was erupting in the clouds below them, a storm of pure electromagnetic energy. "Anya, now," he yelled. "Vent the plasma coolant." Anya slammed a button, and a cloud of iridescent, superheated plasma vented from the Charon's port engine. The lightning, drawn to the sudden energy release, arced upwards. A colossal tendril of cosmic fire. It didn't hit the Quran. It hit the sticks. The purifier ship was engulfed in a blinding flash of white light. Its shields overloaded instantly, its systems shorting out. It tumbled out of the atmosphere, crippled and burning. A fallen angel cast out of heaven. They had survived. But barely. The Karen was a wreck, its systems failing, its hull breached in a dozen places. Status A. Kalen gasped, his knuckles white on the controls. Jax's voice came back. Strained. We're alive, but we're not going anywhere fast. Main drive is shot. We're running on fumes and a prayer. Echo's hologram reappeared, flickering badly. I have analyzed the Purifier's attack patterns and their ship's energy signature. They are not merely following us. Their navigation was too precise. They knew where we would be. Anya looked at Kalen, her cybernetic eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They have a tracker on us. Kalen felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. It wasn't the ship. It was one of them. One of the Reapers was broadcasting their position. A traitor. The realization hit them all at once. A poison that was more dangerous than any Vex or Purifier. They had escaped the hunters, only to find the wolf was already inside the fold. The trust that had bound them together, the last vestige of their old unit, shattered in the suffocating silence of the crippled ship. The Karen drifted in the inky blackness of the serpent's maw, a wounded shark bleeding into the void. The gas giant, their salvation and their near tomb, was a distant, swirling marble of color. Inside the ship, the silence was a physical weight, heavier than any gravity. The accusation hung in the recycled air. One of them was a Judas. Jax was the first to break, his voice a low growl that vibrated through the metal deck. He stood in the doorway of the cockpit, his massive frame blocking the dim light, the plasma cannon held loosely in one hand. "It's the machine," he said, his gaze fixed on Echo's flickering hologram. "It's connected to every network in the galaxy. The Concord could have planted a back door in its code years ago." Echo's synthesized voice was chillingly calm. "My core programming is shielded by quantum encryption that predates the Concord itself. A back door would be statistically improbable. However, a human nervous system, susceptible to chemical, psychological, or technological manipulation, presents a far more likely point of failure. Anya's cybernetics, for example, are of a military grade that could easily house a hidden transponder." Anya, who had been methodically recalibrating the ship's damage sensor array, went still. She turned her head slowly, her silver hair catching the faint glow of the console. Her cybernetic eyes, which could see a man's heat signature from a kilometer away, focused on Jax. "You're accusing me. You oversized troglodyte. You spent the last 5 years brawling in the Hades Belt, a place crawling with Concord informants. Anyone could have slipped a tracer into one of your 100-credit cybernetic knuckles while you were drunk on cheap synthale." "Enough." Kalen's voice cut through the tension like a razor. He stood up, his face a mask of weary command. The feedback scrambler Silas had given him was clutched in his fist. Tearing each other apart is what Valerius wants. He's not just hunting us, he's dissecting us. Remember, he's pulling at the seams. He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze lingering. We all have ghosts. We all have secrets. And one of them is screaming our location to the entire Concord fleet. He walked to the ship's medbay, a small such sterile room that was rarely used. We do this the old way. Full diagnostic. Strip every piece of gear, every implant, every modification. We scan for any unauthorized energy signatures. No one is above suspicion. The process was invasive and humiliating. Jax had to power down the subdermal armor plating woven into his torso. Anya was forced to disconnect her optic implants, leaving her temporarily blind, relying on the ship's internal sensors. Even Echo had to run a self-diagnostic so deep it risked fragmenting his consciousness. Kalen went last. He stripped off his Reaper armor, the familiar weight, leaving him feeling exposed and vulnerable. He ran the bioscanner over his own body, watching the green light trace his bones and organs on the screen. It found nothing. No hidden tracers, no nanite markers, no biological tags. They were clean. All of them. The realization was colder than the void outside. The tracker wasn't a piece of tech. It was something else. "It's in our blood," Echo's voice stated, the hologram reforming in the medbay. He projected a complex string of genetic code into the air. "I cross-referenced the Vex retrovirus from my brother's data with the Reaper program's original bioenhancement protocols. There is an overlap, a deliberate one." Kalen stared at the twisting helix. "What are you saying?" "The enhancements that made us Reapers," Echo explained. "The accelerated healing, the heightened reflexes, the neural interface. They were derived from a sample of inert Vex genetic material recovered decades before Cygnus X1. The Concord didn't just find the Vex. They tried to weaponize them. They used their DNA to build us. The horror of it settled over them. They were not just soldiers, they were prototypes, hybrids. The very source of their strength was also their leash." "The Vex retrovirus in the general population is dormant," Echo continued. "But ours, hybridized with the Reaper enhancements, is active. It emits a low-level bioresonant frequency, a signature. That's what the purifiers are tracking. They're not tracking our gear, they're tracking us. Our very existence is a beacon." Anya, her sight restored, leaned against the wall, a bitter smile on her lips. "So, the monsters they created to fight the other monsters are leading them right to the doorstep." Jax simply clenched and unclenched his massive fists, the sound of popping knuckles echoing the fracturing of their hope. They couldn't run. They couldn't hide. They were walking, talking homing signals for the architect of their damnation. It was Kalen who found the sliver of hope in the abyss. He looked at the feedback scrambler Silas had given him. "If our signature is a broadcast," he said, his voice gaining a hard edge, "then we change the station." He looked at Echo. "Can you modify this scrambler, not just to send a psychic pulse, but to alter the frequency of our bioresonance? Can you make it broadcast a new signal, a false one?" Echo's hologram flickered as he processed the request. "Theoretically, yes. It would require me to interface directly with the device and rewrite its core function. I could create a decoy signal, a ghost of our presence. We could send it in one direction while we go in another." The plan was desperate, a long shot based on untested theories and a piece of black market tech, but it was all they had. While Echo began the delicate and dangerous process of fusing his code with the scrambler's hardware, Anya and Jax worked on patching the Karen's wounds. They were adrift, vulnerable, and the clock was ticking. They knew the Styx would have sent a distress call. Valerius would know his scalpels had failed, and he would send a butcher's cleaver next. The mood on the ship shifted. The paranoia was replaced by a grim, focused rage. They weren't just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting against the ultimate betrayal. The Concord hadn't just disowned them. It had created them from the DNA of the enemy, turning them into abominations, weapons with a built-in self-destruct. The modification took 3 agonizing hours. Finally, Echo's voice returned. It is done. The ghost signal is ready. It will replicate our combined biosignatures and broadcast them on a looping trajectory towards a nearby black hole. It should provide a convincing enough decoy to draw the Concord's attention for at least a few hours. He paused. There is a cost. The energy required to maintain the signal will drain the Charon's remaining power reserves. Once we launch it, we will have one jump, one chance to get to the Genesis Forge before we are dead in the water. Kalen nodded. He took the modified scrambler, now a pulsing, intricate device of crystal and wires, and loaded it into one of the ship's communication buoys. He calibrated the trajectory, aiming it towards the swirling maw of the black hole. The rest of the team gathered on the bridge, the ship running on emergency power, the lights dim, the air thick with anticipation. "Launch the decoy," Kalen ordered. The buoy shot out into the void, a tiny spark of light carrying their ghost. A moment later, Echo confirmed it was broadcasting. "Anya, plot a jump to the Forge's coordinates. Jax, divert every last drop of power to the FTL drive. We get one shot at this." As the ship's FTL drive began to whine, its spooling energy the only sound in the darkness, a proximity alert flashed on the main screen. 3 massive Concord warships, a hunter-killer fleet, dropped out of warp exactly where they had been. They immediately changed course, heading directly for the decoy signal. They took the bait. Anya breathed, a sigh of relief. But their relief was short-lived. A 4th ship appeared. It was smaller, sleeker, and painted the same matte black as the Styx. It ignored the decoy and turned directly towards them. "It's a Purifier command ship," Echo stated. "It must have been running on a different tracking frequency. It sees us." The ship, the Lethe, powered its weapons. They were out of time. "We can't jump with their weapons locked on us," Jax yelled. "It'll tear us apart in the transition." Kalen's eyes were fixed on the approaching Purifier vessel. He saw Valerius's cold, calculating hand in this. The fleet was the distraction. This ship was the real threat. The scalpel meant to make the final killing cut. He looked at the Reaper armor lying dormant in its locker. He looked at the Wraith rifle. He thought of the nightmares Silas's device could unleash. "They want a ghost," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'll give them one." He turned to Anya. "Get ready to jump on my mark. Don't wait for me." Before anyone could object, he hit the emergency release for the cockpit's upper hatch, grabbed his helmet, and phased through the ship's hull into the cold. Silent vacuum of space. He was a phantom in the dark, a lone figure floating between his crippled ship and the angel of death sent to claim it, armed with nothing but a rifle and a decade of nightmares. Space was a silent, screaming cathedral. Kalen floated in the absolute zero. The only sounds the rhythmic hiss of his helmet's recycler and the frantic thunder of his own heart. The Lethe loomed before him, a shard of obsidian against the star-dusted velvet of the serpent's maw. It was close enough that he could see the faint energy shimmer of its forward particle cannons charging. He had seconds. He raised the Wraith, the neural link flaring to life in his mind. He felt the familiar, cold tingle as his thoughts and the weapon's targeting systems became one. He didn't aim for the cannons or the bridge. He aimed for the sensor dome, the ship's eyes. As the first bolt of dark energy tore through the void, he activated the scrambler. The world dissolved into a psychoactive storm. It wasn't just a signal, it was a memory, a feeling, a raw, undiluted broadcast of absolute terror. He felt the burning corridors of Cygnus X1, smelled the coppery tang of his unit's blood boiling in the vacuum, saw the Vex's flesh sculptors twisting his friends into screaming. Living art. He relived every second of the decade of exile, the gnawing loneliness of Tartarus 7, the bitter taste of betrayal. He was broadcasting his soul, weaponizing his pain. Inside the bridge of the Lethe, the effect was catastrophic. The Purifier crew, their emotions chemically dampened and their minds shielded, were suddenly slammed with a tidal wave of raw, unfiltered human agony. The pilot screamed, clawing at his helmet as phantom flames licked at his skin. The tactical officer convulsed, his eyes wide with a terror he was physiologically incapable of feeling. The ship's captain, a woman bred for unnerving calm, saw the face of her dead son in the static of her view screen, his mouth open in a silent, accusatory scream. The Lethe's attack faltered. Its targeting systems flickered and died as Kalen's first shot struck the sensor dome, a bloom of silent, purple fire erupting on its hull. The ship was blind, its crew trapped in a shared nightmare. Now, Anya, jump! Kalen roared into his comm. The Karun, battered but alive, elongated into a streak of impossible light and vanished. The FTL jump ripping a hole in space-time. Kalen was left alone in the dark with the crippled, haunted Purifier ship. His victory was short-lived. The psychic feedback was a two-way street. He had poured his hell into their minds, but a piece of it had splashed back. His vision swam, the stars blurring into streaks of blood. The comm in his helmet crackled with the voices of his dead unit, begging him to save them, to kill them, to end their pain. He fought for control, his mind a fortress under siege. He was a reaper. He was built for this. He was born in this. He activated his suit's thrusters. A small, controlled burst that sent him hurtling toward the nearby debris field from an ancient stellar collision. A graveyard of asteroids and derelict ship hulls. He needed cover. He needed a moment to breathe, to cage the ghosts trying to tear their way out of his skull. The Karen dropped out of warp with the gut-wrenching lurch of a dying machine. They had arrived. Before them, hanging in the void like a tumor of metal and light, was the Genesis Forge. It was not a single object, but a lattice of interconnected spires and rings, miles across, pulsing with a sickly green energy. It was beautiful and horrifying, an instrument of cosmic genocide. The ship was running on nothing. The lights died. The life support coughed its last, and the inertial dampeners failed, leaving them in a cold, silent, zero-gravity tomb. "We're here," Anya whispered, her voice a ghost in the darkness. "Now what?" Jax floated towards the main airlock, his massive form graceful in the absence of gravity. He was carrying a singularity charge, one of the forbidden toys they'd picked up from Silas's armory. It was a weapon capable of creating a micro-black hole, powerful enough to swallow the entire forge. "I go out there," he rumbled, "plant the charge on its central power conduit, and we pray it's enough." It was a one-way trip. The charge's detonation would vaporize him instantly. "There has to be another way," Anya said, her voice tight. Echo. Can you hack it? Shut it down. Echo's hologram was a faint, barely there shimmer. Negative. Its systems are bioorganic, not digital. There is no code to break. The only way to stop the symphony is to destroy the orchestra. Before they could argue, a new voice filled the calm, a voice of cold, perfect calm. Your sacrifice is unnecessary, Reaper. Standing in the airlock, having phased through the outer hull, was the captain of the Lethe. She was clad in sleek, white purifier armor, her helmet retracted to reveal a face that was severe, intelligent, and utterly without emotion. Two other purifiers materialized behind her. They hadn't come to kill them. Not yet. Valerius sends his regards, the captain said, her voice flat. He has been monitoring your progress. He wanted to see if the mongrels he created still had teeth. You do. Impressive. She gestured towards the forge. This abomination is proof that he was right all along. The Vex are a threat that cannot be met with fleets or treaties. They require a more absolute solution. Jax raised his cannon, but the captain didn't flinch. You are relics. Reapers. A failed experiment. We are the cure. Protocol Chimera was never about hunting you. It was about containing you, studying you, until the real threat emerged. From behind the Genesis Forge, a new fleet emerged from the darkness. Not conquered ships, not purifiers. It was a ghost fleet, dozens of matte black vessels, all bearing the Chimera Protocol insignia. Valerius hadn't sent a scalpel or a cleaver. He had sent his entire shadow army. Valerius isn't here to destroy the forge, Echo's voice whispered, a dawning horror in his tone. He's here to claim it. The purifier captain smiled, a cold, predatory expression. The human genome is flawed, weak, susceptible. But with the power of the forge, we can rewrite it. We can purge the weakness, the emotion, the chaos. We can create a new humanity, perfect, unified, strong, one that is immune to the Vex, because we will have become something more. Their betrayal was absolute. Valerius hadn't covered up the Vex threat to protect humanity. He had covered it up to monopolize it. He wanted to control the bloom, to use the Vex's ultimate weapon to force his own twisted vision of evolution upon the galaxy. This was his endgame. Just as the captain raised her weapon, a bolt of dark energy ripped through the chest of the purifier behind her. Kalen phased through the floor of the bridge, the wraith smoking in his hand. His armor was scarred, his breathing ragged, but his eyes burned with a cold, righteous fury. You want to talk about evolution, he snarled, firing again, the second purifier dissolving into molecular dust. The captain lunged, a plasma blade hissing to life in her hand. She was fast, precise, her movements a blur of deadly grace. But Kalen was a Reaper. He didn't fight with grace. He fought with desperation and rage. He phased through her attack, reappearing behind her and ramming the barrel of the wraith against her helmet. I'll show you the end of the line. The battle for the Karen's Bridge was brutal and short. While Kalen fought the captain, Jax and Anya engaged in a zero-gravity ballet of death, their combined fury overwhelming the last purifier. Kalen dispatched the captain, shattering her helmet with the butt of his rifle and leaving her to the mercy of the vacuum. He grabbed her comm unit. Valerius. He broadcast on an open channel, his voice echoing across the Chimera fleet. You wanted a monster. You got one. His gaze fell upon the singularity charge clutched in Jax's hand. An idea. insane and beautiful, took root. He looked at Echo. "Can you overload the Karen's reactor?" Echo's light flickered. Affirmative. The resulting explosion would be considerable. Kalen grinned. A feral, bloody expression. "Get ready to play our song." They had one last desperate card to play. Jax, armed with the singularity charge, phased out of the ship with Kalen, the two of them ghosts against the void, heading not for the Forge, but for the flagship of Valerius's fleet. Enya stayed behind, rigging the reactor to blow, and Echo, the ghost in the machine, did something no one expected. He began to broadcast. He sent everything. The Stargazer's final transmission, the full, unredacted Reaper program files, the truth of Cygnus X1, Valerius's entire genocidal plan. He sent it to every comm relay, every civilian network, every military channel in the galaxy. He ripped the Concord's lies apart and showed the universe the rot that lay beneath. As Kalen and Jax reached the hull of the flagship, the galaxy was erupting in chaos. Valerius's fleet was in disarray. His own crews hearing the truth for the first time. "This is for the Reapers you buried," Jax roared, planting the singularity charge directly over the ship's bridge. "This is for Eris," Kalen whispered, setting the timer. They phased away, two ghosts disappearing into the night. A second later, the flagship imploded, consumed by a silent, ravenous sphere of absolute nothingness. The Singularity's gravitational wave ripped through the Chimera fleet, tearing ships apart. And at that exact moment, Anya overloaded the Karen's reactor. The little ship that had carried them through hell went supernova. Its final defiant roar, a wave of pure energy that slammed into the Genesis Forge. The Forge, caught between the reactor blast and the Singularity's wake, fractured. Its green light sputtered and died, its spires crumbling into dust. The symphony was over. In the aftermath, floating in the wreckage, Kalen found Anya and Jax. They were alive, battered, broken, but alive. Echo's signal was gone. His final act of defiance, a data scream that had saved the galaxy. They were the last, the only Reapers left. The galaxy they had saved would never know their names. They would be remembered as traitors, as monsters, as a footnote in a lie. But as they watched the last embers of the Genesis Forge fade into the darkness, they knew the truth. They were the ghosts who walked, the harvesters of the damned. Their war was over, and in the silent, star-strewn graveyard of the Serpent's Maw, for the first time in a decade, they were finally at peace. They had faced the bloom, the purifiers, and the truth of their own creation, and they had not broken. They had endured. And in a universe of monsters, sometimes, that is the only victory that matters.